Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite books of 2020. I have not done this video in like 2 or 3 years. I did it on my channel like 2 years in a row when I first started, and then I unintentionally stopped because every time I tried to film it, I realized that it was probably just too late. Like, I was trying to film it at like the end of January, and I thought nobody wants to see this now. So finally, it's actually kind of early that I'm filming this, because usually I'd wait until the year's ended, because you never know when you're gonna like squeeze in an extra favorite book. But I think this year I'm pretty like almost done with my reading, so I thought we could do this a couple of days early. So I've picked out 10 books that are my favorite, like the best of the best books that I read in 2020. All of these are 5-star reads, but before we get started, I do have a couple of disclaimers. Number one, I got these glasses for Christmas and I absolutely love them. I can't explain how much more confident I feel wearing glasses, and I don't know why that is, but I just feel like when I have these glasses on, it's like I've reached my final form and I just feel very confident with them. So I'm gonna try and film with them on, and I hope that it's not too irritating because I know that they are very reflective. I feel like these glasses are even more reflective than the average glasses. So I hope it's not too bothersome throughout this video. But my other disclaimers are about the books. So number one, this will obviously not be including any rereads, because otherwise I would just be cycling through like 20 of my favorite books that I read every year. Second bookish disclaimer is that these are not books that were released in 2020. These are just books that I read in 2020. In fact, I think only one of them is actually a 2020 release. And then the third disclaimer is that these are in no particular order. All of these, like I said, are 5 out of 5-star reads. I'm sure some of them I probably enjoyed a little bit more than others, but honestly, I can't rack my brain enough to actually figure out a ranking of them, so the order that I'm showing them to you in is not like from least to best or anything like that, so I just want to make sure nobody has that kind of impression while watching this video. So yeah, now that all of that is out of the way, let's just jump into the books. So the first book that I have here is actually the book that I am currently reading, and I am like 99% sure that I will be able to finish this book before the end of 2020, but even if I don't, this is definitely a 5 out of 5-star read, even though I'm 150 pages into it. I just know that it's going to be one of my favorites for a really long time, and that is The Fellowship of the Ring. I've talked about this before on my channel. Like, I just love these characters so much, even though that I haven't read this series before. Already I'm only 150 pages in, and I've like fallen so much more in love with the story. I'm literally wearing a Lord of the Rings sweater right now. So the story, the characters, like I feel like even if this book was garbagely written, I would still just love these characters so much. So I just know that this will be a 5 out of 5-star read, even though I haven't technically finished it yet. The next book we have here is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. Now I know I just said that these books are in no particular order, but if I had to put them into a little bit of an order, this one would probably be in the top 5 books that I read this year, maybe even top 3. Like, I super loved this book. So in this book we are following Achilles and Patroclus, and it's told from the point of view of Patroclus. I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but we're just gonna go with it. And it's basically their story, how they meet and how their relationship grows into a bit more, and we follow them through the Trojan War, basically through their entire lives, and it is just a phenomenally written story, and I can't rave about it enough. And I should probably just move on now, because I could go on about these books for ages, but then this video would be a million years long. So the next book that we have on the list is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I'm not gonna lie, this is a 5 out of 5-star book, but I already feel like I need to reread it, because this one, out of all the other ones, has definitely left my memory the most. So in this book, it's basically the story of this magical circus. And I feel like this book is actually more like a collection of several kinds of stories, because it takes place over many, many years. We get to see how this circus is first created, and then years and years later, and how this circus has affected certain people. But the main overarching story of this is actually a competition between two magicians, which again spans over years and years, in which only one of them can come out of this sort of competition or game, really. So this was just such a magical story, as you would expect it to be. It is super atmospheric, and it's a very character-driven book, so because of that, it is a little bit on the slower side, because I think that's the biggest downfall for some people that read this book and don't like it, is because it is a little bit slower, because it is just so atmospheric, and you get a lot of descriptions, and then you just get to spend a lot of time with these characters, and those are all of my favorite things, is like atmosphere and the characters. So I super loved this book, and like I said, I think I'm gonna have to give it a reread. Next we have The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. I feel like I mentioned this so much on my channel when I initially read it. Like, I think it appeared in all of my videos for like a month, and I just raved about it in every single one, and I'm here to rave about it again. So this book it's historical fiction, and it is set at a masquerade party, and at the end of this masquerade party, Evelyn Hardcastle is murdered. And we're following our main character called Aidan Bishop, and every single day he wakes up in the body of a different guest, and he has to relive the day over and over again until he's able to solve Evelyn Hardcastle's murder. And this is just one of the most interesting and complex books I've ever read. It is best described as like Agatha Christie meets Clue, and that is a very accurate way to describe this book. Once again, this is a very atmospheric sort of book. It does take place in this like big mansion and on these like huge grounds that have like a family cemetery on them, and you have like all of those, you know, creepy kind of clue settings, and then you get all of the different kinds of characters, and you get to really embody all of these characters since Aidan wakes up in a different one's body every single day. And it really is like two mysteries, because not only are you trying to find out what is happening to Evelyn Hardcastle, but you're also trying to find out what is happening with our main character, like why is he reliving the day over and over and over again, and how is he able to embody these different people. So it's just super interesting, very atmospheric. Would highly recommend it if you are a fan of either Agatha Christie or Clue. And yeah, like I said, I can't talk about these books too much because we'll be here for 17 million hours. Next on my list, we have Call Me By Your Name by Andre Astaman. In this book, we're following our main character called Elio, or Elio, once again. Not really sure how to pronounce his name, but this is set in Italy in the 80s at his family's house. And we're also following Oliver, who is a college student that comes to live with his family for the summer. And this is basically about Elio and Oliver's relationship, and it is a romance story at its finest. It gives you all of the feels, like it gives you all of those kind of happy, like first crush, falling in love kind of feelings, but then it will break your heart on the next page. So it's just, you have to read the book to fully understand it, and also the writing is absolutely amazing. I actually listened to this on the audiobook, which is narrated by Armie Hammer, who plays Oliver in the film, which I also haven't seen the film, so I really need to watch that. But the audiobook was also really, really good. So I recommend the audiobook, but I also think I want to physically read the book as well, because the writing is portrayed beautifully with the audiobook, but I can imagine like how much richer it is actually reading the words on the page. So once again, I definitely have to reread this sometime soon. We then have two nonfiction books on my list. The first one is Love, Lucy by Lucille Ball. You're probably not shocked at all that this made it onto this list, because this is another book that I raved about on my channel when I initially read it. So this is Lucille Ball's memoir slash autobiography, and the way that this book was actually written, if you didn't know, was when Lucille Ball was still alive, she actually recorded herself telling this book, and somebody transcribed it for her, and then she never ended up having it published. And then after she passed, I think her daughter came across this book and then finally had it published, along with a bunch of like old photographs that you have probably never really seen of Lucy and Desi Arnaz, and it was just a lovely story. Like, this is what the back looks like. I'm such a big I Love Lucy fan, and I'm just such a big fan of Lucille Ball in general, so if you are a fan of hers also, I would definitely recommend this book. And also, if you just want to pick up a book that focuses quite a bit on trying to find fame in Hollywood or New York City in like the 20s and the 30s, I would definitely recommend this book. And then the second nonfiction book on my list you'll probably also not be surprised to see, and that is Burton on Burton. This is basically about Tim Burton's work from his own words. Once again, I think it was kind of written in the same style as the Love Lucy book. I think it's a collection of like interviews that he did that were then transcribed into a book, and then in between some of it you do get these more biographical bits that aren't told from his own words, but it is super interesting. It's all about his films up until, I don't remember what the last film was. I think it was The Corpse Bride was maybe the last film that they talk about in this book, which is the only thing that I don't like about this book, is that it was published right before Sweeney Todd, which is my favorite Tim Burton film, and had this been just made a couple years later, we would have been able to hear him talk about Sweeney Todd, and I kind of wish that they would make like a revised version of this book with all of the work that he's done since then, but I still found it super interesting learning about everything else. And while it isn't like a memoir because we're not really learning about his life, it's mainly just about his work, you do still learn so much about Tim Burton because so much of himself is in his work. So when he's like describing the different choices that he makes as far as his movies, you end up learning quite a lot about Tim Burton himself. So this was super interesting, and it's no surprise that I loved it. Next up, we have The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. This is a historical fiction book that is set in Germany during World War II. We are following a young girl who steals books, if you can't guess from the title, but probably the most interesting thing about this book is the fact that it is narrated by death, which was such an interesting way to read this book and is of course a very unique perspective. Like, I'm not sure how many books you have read that have been narrated by death, but I haven't read any, so I thought that that was super interesting and just such a unique way to tell this story. I feel like a common theme that we've had throughout all of these books is that they are very character-driven books, and that is once again the same thing that happens with this book. And again, I feel like for some people the downfall of this book for them is the fact that it's a bit slower, because we do just get a lot of time with these characters. It is kind of a slower, mundane sort of story, but I just loved the characters so much that I did not mind lingering in these scenes with them for a longer period of time, and even during the boring parts I was still really invested in the story. So I would totally recommend this book, and this is even coming from somebody who doesn't like World War stories, so I kind of went into this book expecting to hate it, but I just absolutely loved it. And you might need a tissue box for the ending of this book, just saying. Second to last book on my list, although once again they aren't in any particular order, we have Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. This is the most recent book that I have read, and of course I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be on this list right now. I'm pretty sure everybody is probably pretty familiar with this story from either watching one of the many adaptations or reading this book when they were younger, but I actually didn't read this for like school or anything like that. This is one of the classics that I never had to read in school, so I actually also wasn't familiar with the story at all until this year, because I had also never seen any of the adaptations until watching the Greta Gerwig version earlier this year and absolutely falling in love with it. So it made me want to pick up the book, but I was also nervous to read the book because despite enjoying the movie, I thought that I probably would not get along with the writing of the book, because I'm not really a classic reader. I struggle a lot with the writing, whereas in this book, the writing feels surprisingly modern considering when the book was released. Like, other books written in this time period, I really struggled to read them, and that's how I thought this book would be, and it wasn't. I also wasn't sure if I would like it because even though I enjoyed it in movie form, this isn't like a particularly I don't want to say interesting story because it is an interesting story, but it's kind of mundane if you think about it. Like, you're really just following the lives of these four sisters and Lori, and it's kind of mundane following them through their lives. Nothing super exciting happens, but it is all about the way that these characters are written that makes you want to read it, and it makes you love it. Like, I love these characters so much. They are now some of my favorite characters that I don't know how I haven't, like, really ever been introduced to their story before this year, but now I feel like I've known them for a really long time, if that makes sense. But it really is all about the way that Louisa May Alcott wrote these characters that just makes you want to read about their mundane parts of their lives, and them cooking and cleaning and failing and bringing food to their neighbor and all of that jazz. Like, it's just a lovely time, and it is such a lovely story with very important topics in it. So once again, I would highly recommend this book, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be in this video. And then the final book in this video is actually 2 books, but they're a part of the same series, so I'm just pretending like they're one to fit into the 10 books. But that is Serpent and Dove, as well as the sequel Blood and Honey. If you don't know what this series is about, which means that you probably haven't seen many of my videos within the last few months, because once again, I feel like I mentioned this in like 20 different videos and I explained the synopsis so many times, but I'm going to explain it again. So in the first book, Serpent and Dove, it is historical fiction, and we're following our main character called Lou, and she is a witch, which given the time period she has to keep hidden, otherwise she could end up being burned at the stake or something like that. So due to a series of events, she ends up actually being forced into an arranged marriage with a witch hunter who obviously doesn't know that she is a witch, and it is just one of the most fantastic stories I have ever read. It is like a historical fiction romance, so it is very heavy on the romance. So if you think it's going to be like a fantasy book that has like a romance element in it, that definitely isn't what this is. This is very much like a romance book, but that is my favorite part about it. I love the 2 main characters' relationship so much. In the first book, they kind of hate each other, so it's a bit of a love-hate relationship because they're both forced into this marriage that they don't want. The best part about it for me was that Lou is just the funniest, snarkiest, sassiest main character ever, and given the time period, she's married to quite a religious man who doesn't like swearing or crudeness or anything like that, and that is literally all that Lou does throughout these books, is like swears and makes inappropriate jokes and sings inappropriate songs, and he is just horrified the whole time. But I find it to be the funniest but also the most charming thing ever, and I just love their relationship so much. That was definitely my favorite part about both of the books in this series. Cannot wait to read the 3rd one, which I'm hoping is coming out sometime in 2021. And if it's anything like the first 2 book covers in this series, the 3rd book is going to have a gorgeous cover, because I thought Serpent and Dove was a pretty cover. This is even more like stunning, and I can't wait to see the cover of the 3rd book, but also how the story is taken. But I'm also excited to see the cover because I'm a little superficial. But anyways, those are all of the books that I have for my top 10 favorite books of 2020. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. I'd love to discuss them with you. Also, let me know what your favorite books were that you read in 2020, and if you think there are any that I would particularly enjoy. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!
You hear that, Samson?